Are you ready for this part 2 of this follow along Blender tutorial where we are making these beautiful little snowflake ornaments that we are using somebody's name as the basis of the shape for our snowflake? Now, if you remember in part 1, we used a new feature in Blender whereby Blender can now bring in images directly, take those images and convert them to grease pencils, take those grease pencils, convert them to curves, and take those curves and convert them to meshes. But the process was a little bit flawed. Going from the grease pencil to the curve, it didn't fill in the curve. It didn't transfer the fill of the grease pencil to the curve, which means that we now have to create the fill ourselves. We have to, in our mesh, select edges and hit F to fill in those meshes. But it's possible that at some point in the future that you might be living in, that we don't have to do that anymore, that feature has been fixed. And if you are living in that beautiful utopian future, well, then you can skip these steps where I'm selecting edges and going through and having to do that. But I can't skip those. I have to do them, so I better get back on that. I need to finish filling out my mesh and making it one solid object the way that we need to. So here we go. All right. I find myself when I'm doing this sort of work getting very, very tense and uptight about the whole thing. So I've connected all my donut holes to an edge so that there's just one edge exposed. And now I'm going to try to be very bold in this. Now, you don't have to be this bold. You can work in smaller sections. But now that it's all just one contiguous section, I'm going to try to connect them all in one fill command. Should we see how that goes? Remember to hold down Alt to select entire edges. And oh, look at all those edges we selected. I also need to select over here and over here and over here. Oh, I've got a problem. Well, maybe I'll select that middle separately. There we go. Do you see how when there's a connection, it doesn't jump across it? So I've either got to fill that in myself later, or I've got to go through and select those individually. But, just... Again, we're being bold and we're being brave. And if I accidentally select on one of these edges, you'll notice it selects the face that I've already made. So I'm being careful not to select those edges with the Alt. But here we go. And I'm just going to skip over that middle part for now. I'll come back to it. I'll get it in a minute. Have we got it? Oh, that's everything. Oop. Shall we see what happens when we hit F? I'm a little bit worried. It didn't work. Okay, so obviously it's time to go back and just work in smaller sections. That was silliness, and sometimes it'll work, but in this case it didn't, and that's okay. It's fun to take and try and do something new and push it, and if you fail, undo is always your friend. All right, I guess I've got a little bit more work left to go. Oh, got to be careful with those Alt selects. So I've got a little bit more work to go, so I'm just going to turn on some classical music or my favorite YouTuber on the other monitor, and I'm just going to finish working until I've got this entire thing filled out. Being careful not to select. See, right there, I just selected a point that I already did, so remember, middle mouse click will deselect it. And just going and doing the whole thing. Let's finish this up. Actually, immediately afterwards, I noticed that I made a mistake. Look, I've got a crossover here. This edge and this edge and that edge and that edge. I've got to select that edge and delete that edge. And now I've got to go back and redo it. It's okay to make mistakes. Look, even I make mistakes, and it's okay to make those mistakes, and it's easy to correct them. That's a wonderful thing about working with digital tools, you're never committed to a mistake. And the other wonderful thing about working with 3D printing is even if you make a mistake, you can always do a reprint. All right, let's finish this up real fast. All right. We managed to do some pretty big chunks there at the end. I think I could have been bolder, but that's all right. So once we have it like this, once we have it as a solid single object with the shape, the faces in the drawing that we want, we are doing good. Now we're going to add modifiers. The rest of this is going to be mostly done with modifiers. And the first modifier we're going to add is called solidify. So in the right panels here, in the properties panel, in the modifier tab that looks like a wrench icon, we're going to add the modifier, and it is called solidify. Now, solidify will turn this flat object into a three-dimensional object. So let's go ahead and give it a thickness of 1 millimeter. Now you'll immediately notice that mine is messed up, and maybe yours is too. What's happening here? Well, what's happening here is in making these faces, some of them are pointing up and some of them are pointing down. In Blender, in any 3D modeling program or in any 3D object, faces have a direction. It's called a normal. And in Blender, it keeps track of which direction that face is. And so the modifier, solidify, works according to the direction of the face. So what do we do when our faces are all pointed in different directions? How could we see that? Well, there's a way to see it. I believe it's under the, no, it's not the view here. It is one of these menus here. There we go. Edge, length, edge, angle. There we go. Normals right there. Here we can see the normals, makes them into like nice little hairs, and we can see, yeah, that normal's going down and that normal's going up. It's a mess. How do we fix our normals? Okay, real easy. Hit A, select all your points. And I believe it's under mesh. I just know the shortcut key for this off the top. Oh, there it is, normals. So under mesh, normals, you see it's Alt-N and right hand here, Shift-N, recalculate outside. So I'm going to pop out and I'm going to use the Shift key, or the hotkey Shift-N, and recalculate the normals. And you'll see here you can actually say, do you want to do it inside or outside? It'll flop it either direction. It doesn't matter which way it is, so long as they're all consistent. Shift-N fixes that in one go. Now you might also think, wow, that's really, really thick. Do we want it that thick? Well, no, we don't. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my normal view. I don't need to see that anymore. But why is it so thick? Well, that's 1 millimeter, but remember, our thing was very, very small in here. So what we want to do is select all of our points, scale them up until our thing is about, from, there we go, about there. Remember, we're working with 100 millimeter square here to give us an idea. And so, yeah, we want to occupy about half that space, because remember, this is going to be just one arm on a snowflake, and snowflakes go in both directions. It's 6 directions. So there we go. And now if we look at our thickness, that's a much more reasonable 1 millimeter. So, and by doing that scaling in edit mode, if we had done it, and I'm just watch my screen for 1 second. I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to exit edit mode, and I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to put it where we want. If we look, it's a little bit thicker than it was before. Well, that's because now we've got a scale factor done to our object. And if you did that, that's fine. There's nothing to worry about. Just hit Control A and apply your scale. And now we're back to a normal scale despite the size of it. Size and scale are not necessarily related. And it's 1 millimeter thick the way we want it. So that's good. Going back to the top view here, going back into edit mode. Okay, we've got our solidify modifier on here, but I'm going to change the offset on that solidify modifier to a +1 instead of a -1. Now it's extruding it up instead of extruding it down. So that's fantastic. We need to add another modifier, but before we add, no, actually this modifier we can add just fine. So let's add modifier mirror. But let's change it, instead of being the x-axis, let's change it to the y-axis. Now, depending on your object's origin, it's reflecting around the object's origin, which isn't necessarily the object. It might be in a different place. Notice if I select all these points and move them around, it's still kind of reflecting around. And can you see the point that it's reflecting around? Yeah, there's a little orange dot. That's your object's origin, and all the transformations, rotation, scaling, or rotation, moving, all of them move relative to that dot. But the rest of the dots in your object don't need to be at the origin or around the origin. This is powerful. You can set the origin to the edge of an arm and have that arm pivot at the elbow. That's what we use the origin for. But we want this origin basically in the smack middle of our scene. So how do we get it there? Well, the easiest way is to exit edit mode. So hit tab and then hit Control A to apply. And this time apply the location. And now our origin's in the middle. And if we go back to edit mode and move things around and rotate it, it's all mirroring now relative to that point. And in fact, that's what I want you to do right now. Well, actually, not yet, but we'll do that in a second. Do move the points so they're closer to that straight line, but we'll fine tune them in just a little bit. Already, though, you can see, isn't that a neat little pattern? It's taken our name and it's turned it into something pretty. Let's exit edit mode. Look at that just beautiful thing. Yeah, the name's still in there, but it looks, just by adding some symmetry to it, it makes it beautiful. I love that. Okay, I'm going to collapse down the mirror modifier, and I'm going to add one more modifier, and it's called the array modifier. Up here at the top, there it is, array. Now we need to array it 6 times, but notice the array modifier is just shooting them all out to the side, so we get 2 copies, 3 copies. This isn't the way that we want it. Well, that's because it's doing a relative offset here. So turn off the relative offset. That could be a very useful thing to do in the future, but we're going to do it on an object offset. But we haven't got the object, so again, make sure we're in object mode, not in edit mode, and we're going to add a new object, and it's going to be an empty. Empties are fantastic. They have no geometry associated with them. You can't 3D print an empty, but you can transform them, and we can use that transformation to change our object with the array modifier. Watch this. I'm going to add a plane axis, and I'm going to take this empty object right here. It's just an object, and I'm going to rotate it 1/6 of a rotation. Now, if I knew what that was, what could 360 divided by 6 be? Oh, too much math for my brain. Never mind. Blender will do it for you. Go into the properties panel here in the item, okay, the sidebar. No, this isn't sidebar. There's properties. And rotation Z, type in 360 divided by 6. Or if you're a smarty pants, you could just go straight to 60 degrees because you already knew that. So now this object rotated 60 degrees. So if we select our trace object and go down to the object that we're using for our object offset and select the empty, boom. Every one of these that it counts is rotated 60 degrees. You can actually have an object that you scale and rotate and do all kinds of cool stuff with. Play with that at some point. In fact, I'm going to play with it right now just a little bit. I'm going to grab my empty and I'm going to scale it down. Look, they're rotating and scaling with each movement. Oh, that's fun. I'm going to undo that though. Maybe if I hit GZ and move them up. Oh, look, they're stair stepping. Oh, I can make spiral stairs with this. Okay, enough playing around. Let's leave it as a snowflake. We're pretty good with this right here. But now I want you to select the trace, go into edit mode, select all the points, and I want you to adjust your shape. I want you to make it so that the name is still visible, but everything's touching in the middle. Make sure things are touching on the sides. I'm not quite sure, like with every shape, sometimes I have to turn them all the way around to find a way that works best. Sometimes I have to do them from the bottom. Yeah, I don't like that one. You know, just play with it. Give yourself some time. Maybe it's too big. and I need to pop it out to the side like that. You know, maybe I want to take, well, this is okay, but I think if I make these right there, that's better. Oh, I can get that right into the middle there. But now I want to take these points, just these points right here in the end, and I want to move them down so they touch like that. There we go. There's a pretty little snowflake. I don't know how yours is going to turn out, but, you know, I've got a Discord channel with a What You Making channel. If you want to show me your snowflake and how it turned out, go jump on there. The link's in the description. Now, before we're done, this looks great, but if we go into wireframe mode, we can see that it's actually just a bunch of discrete objects next to each other and not a joined object. Remember when we talked about the Boolean tool during the lessons that we talked about how we can make these like one solid bubble. Well, here's the second cool feature that Blender just added. They just updated the Boolean tool with an exact measurement. Normally, this sort of Booleaning would cause Blender troubles because we've got faces that are in the exact location overlapping with each other, and the math for that. They added an exact Boolean. It's slower. But they also added one more neat feature. So here's what I'm going to do. Go make sure we're in edit mode on your trace. And I want you to first of all duplicate this by hitting Shift D or Object Duplicate. Okay. We're going to take that duplicate, which you can see is called Trace 01 in the outliner, and we're going to hit M to move it now. Remember M when we were in edit mode is merge, but out of edit mode it's move. That's the way Blender works. And we're going to move it to a new collection, and we're going to call this collection snowflake parts. Okay. Now, I want you to take that original trace and hide it, either by clicking the eye icon in the outliner or by selecting it and hitting H. I chose the eye outline. And we're going to take our trace object here, and we're going to apply all these modifiers. Now, there's two ways that you can do that. One way is a little drop down here and apply, and just do each one in order. Or, do you see I've got this apply all button? What is that button? It's an add-on. If you don't have it, go to Edit, go to Preferences, go to Add-ons, search for Modifier Tools. I just had to type in MOD, and there it is. Turn it on, and then be sure to save that. I've got autosave on, but I always save it just as force of habit, you know. And now I've got an Apply All button, and if I hit that button, boom, all of these are applied. If I go in Edit mode, you'll see, hey, no modifiers. Everything is just as it is, but we still have overlapping objects. So here's what I want you to do. You can either do this under, I believe it's mesh and separate, there it is, or just by hitting P. So I'm going to pop out of the menu and hit P. And I'm going to separate by loose parts. That takes all the loose parts, breaks them into their own object. And because we moved that object into its own collection, all of those parts, all 12 of those spiral arms are in a one collection in our outliner, which keeps things organized. But more than that, watch what it's going to do for the brand new Blender file. All right. First, we need an object to Boolean them all together. Not Blender. I said Blender. I meant Boolean. Watch what it does for the new Boolean. This is so cool. Here we go. We need an object to Boolean. We could just choose one of them and Boolean them, but we're not going to do that. Instead, I want you in the outliner view to click on our original collection, that little white icon next to it, so that this next object gets added in that collection, so we keep it separate from the other. Ready? Hit Shift A, add a mesh cylinder. Okay, open up the properties of that, and we want that mesh cylinder to be bigger. We want it to have a radius of 2, so that'll give it a width of 4. This is the hole that we're going to run string through, so maybe I'll make this 3. Good. Depth, we only want this to be 1 millimeter deep because we want it to be the same thickness as our snowflake. Maybe I should have set the snowflake to be in the middle with an offset of 0. Oh well, live and learn. All I have to do is take this piece and hit, here's the keys, GZ 0.5, type 0.5 on your keyboard, press enter, and that moves it up into Z 0.5 millimeters. Who says Blender can't do exact movement? Look at that. I just moved it exactly 0.5 millimeters. So that's pretty cool. Now we're going to take this object and I'm going to isolate it by hitting the slash on the numpad to go into local view. You could do that also into view. Hit tab, go back to solid mode. And in face select, select top face and just delete that face, and then select the bottom face and delete that face. Now we've just got a ring around the edge. Can't 3D print this, but we're going to use the solidify modifier again. So exit edit mode. We probably still got that modifier panel up. Hit modifier. Okay. Hit solidify. Okay. And we're going to make the thickness of this 2 millimeters. Oh, but change the offset to 1 so it goes out. Yeah, 2 millimeters is good. Okay, exit local mode by hitting that slash key again. And then we want to put this somewhere that makes sense for this. And for me, I just want to move it, you know, straight to the left along the x-axis. So I'm going to be printing this sideways, but that works for me. Depending on the geometry, the way that your snowflake was laid out, you may have to put this in a different place. It may work better for you to put it up or down or wherever works for you. Use your brain on this one. Okay, now let's collapse the solidify modifier on our cylinder here. And in fact, I haven't named this object. This is not a cylinder. This is now a hanging ring. Yes. And on our hanging ring, let's add a Boolean modifier. Now, I said the Boolean modifier changed recently, and it did. Change it to union here. Okay. And we could still work as usual. Notice we've got now a new menu, fast or exact. I'm going to switch it to fast for now. I'll switch it to exact later, but I don't want Blender to crash my computer while I'm doing a recording. So I'm going to switch it to fast. Now I could do object and I could just select one object, but if you hit that drop down, we can do a collection and we can do it on the all the objects in the snowflake part are now going to be Boolean one at a time. How cool is this? I'll answer that for you. It's super cool. Okay, let's select our snowflake parts object, and once I click this, it's going to do the math. All right, it looks like it did okay. I'm going to go to local view on this one. It doesn't look too bad with the fast. Let me see. I'm seeing some things that are making me worry. Yeah. We've still got some internal vertical geometry here. It didn't quite work. It looks okay, but yeah, the slicer is going to have some troubles with some of these overlaps. Yep, we're going to have to switch to exact. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit exact. And if you've got a slower computer at home, when you hit exact, go make yourself some cocoa and relax for a little while. This might take a bit. However, the 3D printing professor has got a pretty good computer, and it's going to be, there it is. It's fairly fast. It did exact. If I inspect this really closely, yeah, those internal, well, that actually looks like it's still doing, nope. Look, no lines going between them in the middle. It cleaned it up. It did a great job. That exact Boolean modifier, oh, so good. We're done. We're ready to go. So all you have to do is file, export, STL, put it wherever you want it. Make sure to hit selection only because we only want to do it with this one. And then name and export your ornament and then 3D print it out. So there you go. You guys now have got a great way to make personalized snowflake ornaments for your friends and family, but you've also learned some new skills in Blender, I hope, that will help you do future projects. And so pat yourself on the back. You did a great job. And yeah, I'd love to see your ornaments in the What You Making channel on my Discord, link in the description. But that's all I've got for now, and I'm certain that we've run long enough for this video. But Merry Christmas to everybody, and if it's not yet Christmas, there is a Christmas coming up, and I'm sure that this will help you then. And until we see each other, take care of yourself, take care of a loved one and others if you can. And I know it's just a Blender video, but safety first. Stay safe because I care about you.